we want to rate the band. Happy sing your own a song, can't compete with.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our session tonight, Food Literacy for All. We are in for a treat, especially tonight. We get to hear from Aleya Fraser on food sovereignty and chocolates. As always, thank you for our sponsors. Tonight in particular is brought to us by the Latin American and Caribbean Studies, Residential College, School of Public Health, the School for the Environment and Sustainability, and the Department of American Culture. Thank you for those of us who support, and for the Center for the Education of Women on campus as well. Our leadership team here is Shakira Tyler, myself, Jessica Walker, and Lily Fink Shapiro. We are also supported by Megan Gross and Nyéléni Hernandez, as well as Kemi Vandewedge and Chris Taylor. Just a reminder that this is a course that is free and open to the public, so please spread the word. Students, remember to always attend these sessions using your UMich email address. That's very important. And if you are part of our ever-growing community attendees, there are optional readings that are always available on the FSSI website. Feel free to live tweet this talk at #FoodLiteracyForAll. Poll questions for our class help engage you, but also help us keep track of attendance and your participation grade. Remember that you have to complete 2 out of the 3 to count towards that. All classes are filmed and will be available on the SFSI website, usually by tomorrow. And closed captioning is available on Zoom. Please also use the Q&A box for any questions you'd like to address in class. And remember that you don't have to wait towards the end of the session to submit those questions. It's always open and available to you. Our next session is our first of 2 in-person sessions on March 14th. Fast Food for Thought details are linkable in the chat. And we have a really great group of faculty on campus who are giving lightning talks. So it's really important that you arrive to the Dana building, room 1040. On time would be around 6:10, even 6 o'clock. We will start promptly at 6:30. This session, although like our normal sessions will be recorded and available, it will not be live streamed. So please do make a note that you have to be in person for this session. This will not be live streamed, although it will be recorded. Quick note about summer internship fellowships with the SFSI, available to any current master's students here at the university. These are great programs, a generous stipend, and applications are due by April 1st. Please also see the Sustainable Food Systems Initiative website for more information on that. Another link also to urban agricultural internships for the summer. These are for students, undergraduate students, so not necessarily master's students. The application deadline for this is coming up on Friday, March 10th. The Campus Farm Club has an info session. You can scan the QR code here on the screen to RSVP. But our campus farm is really a beacon in sort of, public universities and their commitment to sustainable food systems. So please do check that out. Save the date also for the Michigan Good Food Summit that will be happening in East Lansing, Michigan on May 19th. And really quickly, before we pass it off to Shakira, just a quick note about Harmonize, and make sure that you are paying attention, being very detail oriented on what the assignment is asking for. If you react, participate, or comment, And if you need further clarification on that, reference our first week of harmonized assignments. It's called Harmonized Test, or the learning guides that we've posted. So just highlighting, Lisa, as a quick clarification that the urban agricultural internships are available to both undergrad and grad students. So you have the summer internships, but also ones that are specifically for grad students that are due April 1st. But links to that content are on the SFSI website. And I will pass it off to Shakira to introduce our speaker for tonight.
Hello, everybody. Peace, and thank you for joining us. I'm so excited to introduce Aleya Fraser, a dear friend and comrade of mine in the food sovereignty movement. This is Moyo, who's joining us here tonight because he's homesick. And I want to spend some time introducing Aleya. Give me a moment. Aleya is a return generation farmer and a seed keeper. She plays many, many roles just within the agrarian social movements throughout the African diaspora. She's originally from Baltimore, Maryland. She came to farming through her ancestral background, education, and experiences where she began to understand food as medicine and land as power has really controlled or dictated how she, what work she does and how she moves through the movement. She's also a lifelong student and educator who once taught secondary sciences in a charter school in Camden, New Jersey. Farming and feeding people's physical and mental health through land stewardship is the crux of all of her passions. Since she started farming and organizing around food sovereignty, Aleya has taken courses in agroecology at UC Santa Cruz, which is in California, permaculture at Rowe Institute in Massachusetts, and Wasamaki permaculture ecosystems in Trinidad. Hope I pronounced that right, Aleya, please correct me if not. And the farmer to farmer methodology at ANOP Institute in Cuba, beginning farmer training program in Maryland, and as well as presented and keynoted conferences on a range of agricultural topics. She has also worked on the ground on multiple farms, organized many land-based gatherings of activists and organizers at her farm and around the region, and worked in other levels of the food system as regional program manager for Chesapeake Alliance for Sustainable Agriculture, and as an independent consultant for various organizations and farm businesses. So as you can see, Aleya is a very dynamic organizer, farmer, agroecologist, many, many roles. And I'm really honored to call her a near and dear sister of mine, a soil sister, as we like to say. And I'm excited that she's going to share a lot of her work and her stories here with us tonight. So passing it to Aleya.
Thank you, Shakira. You were right beside me for a lot of that bio, so I appreciate you and all the work you do too. Can I get access to move the slides? No, it's not working. Okay. Thank you. So this is my information that they'll send out. So my email and my phone number. Next slide. Our talk today. So in a broad stroke, I really want a call to remember and embody food sovereignty for Trinidad and Caribbean nations that produce and export so much of their wealth. And I want to make this call through an appreciation of cacao farmers and the chocolate making process. I also want us to deeply remember the call for food sovereignty from peasant farmers, campesinos, and women, because we owe most of the nonprofit and educational and food systems work that is happening around agriculture today and food sovereignty and food justice to these farmers, these women, these campesinos, these peasants that put forth this beautiful document and declaration that we're going to dive into. So we're going to analyze the Nyéléni Food Sovereignty Declaration and talk about its relevance today, deepen our collective understanding of food sovereignty and agroecology. The fun part is when we review the bean to bar process of chocolate making, because that's one of my near and dear passions right now. My husband's a chocolate maker, so I kind of married into the business, but it's perfect because it helps me work with farmers very closely. And we're gonna highlight the importance of food sovereignty principles from Mali and the Nyéléni gathering to its implications in the cacao industry. So let's start with Nyeleni. Even though this gathering and La Via Campesina and all the work around it that came from it was so integral in my journey, it's shocking that it wasn't until I was researching for this presentation that I learned the meaning of the word. I don't know, maybe I just thought it was just the name of a place, but it means first daughter. And that woman was, there's a story about her being the daughter of a peasant couple at a time when one child was, considered shameful, but they still kept her. And she ended up being a highly regarded farmer who supported her family, was innovative. She's credited with bringing forth the grain fonio to the world. And, that just really made my heart warm and fuzzy because I'm also a first daughter. I'm the first daughter of a second daughter of a first daughter. And I am Nyeleni. I followed my ancestral calling from Baltimore City, where I started farming, which took me to the rural Eastern Shore of Maryland, where I co-founded Black Dirt Farm, which turned into Black Dirt Farm Collective. And that was on the ancestral lands of Harriet Tubman. So there was a deep ancestral pull to that land. And it felt like I was returning to finish a job in a way to return to a place that Harriet Tubman, Araminta Ross had escaped from, to plant seeds, to continue the work that she did, but also without the fear of enslavement and with the goal of my own freedom through working on the land. And then that ancestral call took me somewhere else. It sent me to Trinidad, which is where my family is from. My father is Trinidadian, and I grew up coming here back and forth. And one of my first memories of critical thinking around food systems was seeing, we're walking down the street near my grandmother's house, and she's stopping in someone's yard and picking up mangoes. We go into another place and we're dropping off ripe bananas from her yard. And I was like, dang, you really can't be hungry here if everyone can share and grow and support each other in that way. So that was my first recollection of how important this work was and is. And it wasn't until I started farming, or it wasn't until I moved to Trinidad and started really connecting with my paternal ancestry that all these stories came out. Like my great-grandfather, my grandmother's still alive, she's 94, and her father was the farmer for the village that she still lives in. My father, who never mentioned farming a day in his life to me, also used to work on cocoa farms and remembers, bagging up cocoa beans with his uncles. And it just, seeing those little pieces come back to me and helps me remember my purpose and helps, drive my passion for this work. While I was farming on the Eastern Shore of Maryland, that was really my deep dive into agroecology and food sovereignty, because we were working with a lot of people from the La Via Campesina movement. We were having agroecology gatherings. We were putting on workshops and creating shared political identity around agroecology and eventually Afroecology, which I'll talk a little bit about later. So that's a little background about me and the Nyeleni, the background behind the name. So we know that, well, I heard that this was part of your required reading, the declaration. So I just want to give a little bit of background and setting to say why it feels so resonant, why it's so important, and why this declaration will live forever in our hearts and help guide our work. And that is because it happened in 2007, and it was in Africa, of course, in Mali. And there were more than 500 peasants there, migrant workers, fishermen, fisherfolk, who were coming from 80 different countries, 5 different continents. And And they were joined by allies as well. So it wasn't just farmers and fisher folk, it was non-government organizations, volunteer interpreters, administrators, coordinators, cooks, medics. A lot of the gatherings that we used to put on at Black Dirt were very grassroots in the way that we cooked for each other, we took care of each other, and that was a direct thread from this gathering that showed that even in the middle of an impoverished area in Africa, you can have 500 people gathered and everyone is eating good. I think they said they had 30 women cooking around the clock, but those women were paid well. All the food came from local, and that really sets the tone, the intention, and the spirit of the gathering when you're gathering in that grassroots type of way. And for 6 days, this group discussed, debated, told stories. They struggled over language and culture, but they had a shared struggle. And out of that shared struggle came the declaration. So I'm going to go into first what they define food sovereignty as, and then also go into their strategies and organizing around it, and connect it all to cacao and chocolate along the way. So in the declaration, they define food sovereignty as the right of peoples to healthy and culturally appropriate food produced through ecologically sound and sustainable methods, and their right to define their own food and agriculture systems. One of the things that to me is most important is that it puts those who produce, distribute, and consume food at the heart of food systems and policies, rather than the demands of markets and corporations. As I was reading that to myself while I was making the slide, I was like, yeah, nowadays you might want to add, rather than the demands of markets and corporations and nonprofit industrial complexes. And that might not have been something they saw back then, but now we're seeing that, even when people have the best intentions or the mission says that it's for something, if farmers and people producing the food are not at the center of the decision making, are not at the center of where the money is going, if they're not at the center of the policies, then what are we really doing? And I think always grounding ourselves in this definition will really help everyone's work moving forward. As I go through the definition, I also want you to think about how it aligns or doesn't align with your understanding of food justice and food sovereignty from what you've seen on the ground at conferences, at your jobs, in your classes. And I think we can agree overall that messaging around food sovereignty and food justice can get watered down and co-opted. So I can't help but revisit this declaration every once in a while to make sure I'm on track professionally and personally. So I offer all these points for us to ponder in our work and personal lives. The next section on what is food sovereignty, it offers a strategy to resist and dismantle the current corporate trade and food regime, and directions for food, farming, pastoral, and fishery systems determined by local producers. Food sovereignty prioritizes local and national economies and markets, and empowers peasants and family farmer-driven agriculture. So our philosophy in my business with chocolate makers is to prioritize and work with Trinidad farmers, sell to Trinidad consumers, and eventually have scaled out local manufacturing so that cocoa beans don't even have to be exported and can enrich the local economy here more. So that speaks directly to that second point on the slide of prioritizing local and national economies. This picture is of my daughter, who is helping us buy 50 kilos of cacao beans direct trade from one of our friends. I think this was like late at night, but she was inspecting the beans. She already knows what, how dry they need to be, what they need to smell like. We're teaching her young. Food sovereignty also promotes transparent trade that guarantees just income to all peoples and the rights of consumers to control their food and nutrition. That just income piece, we don't even have to go too deep into, but internationally, the price for cocoa beans is between $2 and $3 a kilo. and it depends on large transnational corporations who are buying and selling it. However, in Trinidad, for example, those same beans, or not the same beans because they are better quality, you know, we're paying $5.20 up to $6 a kilo. So that's over double the price. And that's just because we're doing direct trade, and we, you know, we're not tied into that transnational corporation agenda. It's interesting also to note that up until only 10 years ago, Trinidad farmers couldn't even sell their beans directly to other people. That was illegal. It had to go to a cocoa board, which was owned by the government. And that's still the case in a lot of African countries where, you know, farmers are being exploited, the price of beans is way too low. And because of that, you know, we get flooded with cheap chocolate. So food sovereignty also ensures the rights to use and manage our lands, territories, water, seeds, livestock, and biodiversity are in the hands of those who produce the food. 5 out of every 6 farms in the world are less than 2 hectares and operate on 12% of agriculture land, but yet they produce 35% of the world's food. So those are the people we need to be asking about food sovereignty, and asking about climate resilience, and asking about what they need to thrive and survive, because they're literally feeding us. So this is a picture of a pruning workshop of cocoa trees. One beautiful thing in Trinidad is that there's a lot of women involved in extension and in cocoa farming. So I think this was a female or woman extension agent teaching other people how to prune trees correctly. So to me, food sovereignty and agroecology go hand in hand. Nyéléni had the Declaration of 2007 on food sovereignty, but there was another gathering in 2015 on agroecology and defining that for the people. So I wanted to, you know, offer these as pillars to think about as well. Agroecology is so much more than a set of principles and practices, which, you know, have been distilled down in university courses or taught in sustainable agriculture circles. It's a way of life that's so ingrained in our DNA. It's production practices based on ecological principles. It's indigenous. It really one of its foundations is that indigenous territories are fundamental. It focuses on collective rights and access to the commons. Focuses on honoring diverse ways of knowing and collective self-organization and action. And lastly, autonomy from global markets and transition to shorter distribution chains. Even though most of my organizing has been in the global north, what the global south has to offer to the rest of the world, to me, is pragmatism. We have many of the problems down here, and we don't have time to lose by discussing theoretical questions and sitting in conferences. Honestly, like people, like we're seeing the effects of floods, of drought, of too much rain. We're seeing the effects of transnational corporations, you know, messing up the economy and poisoning water. Like all of those things have been happening in the global south a lot longer, I feel, than it's been happening in North America and Europe. So it's like, you know, we have to learn from each other. And I've been lucky to like move between both spaces a lot to see that, you know, 10 years later, you know, people in the global north are dealing with the same things that people in the global south are dealing with. And instead of focusing just on production and practices, people are realizing they actually have to focus on, you know, a new way of living, a new way of being. I speak of, like when people speak of climate change, to me, it's just a matter of resiliency. It's a matter of knowing that, you know, things can't ever stay the same. God has changed. So we have to continue to learn from each other on, you know, what to do next and how to move forward with how things are changing. But as we know, the global south has a lot to learn from, and people have been doing this for years, traditionally without resources. So yeah, that's what I wanted to say about that. But now we have a question. I want to ask question number 1, so we can put that on the slide to see if everyone's been paying attention. So the question is, the Nyéléni Declaration puts who at the heart of the food system and food system policies? Does it put those who produce, distribute, and consume food at the top and the heart, transnational corporations, government institutions, or people of the global south? Okay, 74% of the people got it. I put the tricky one in there by saying people of the global south because granted, 80% of food is grown by people in the global south, but that's, you know, that was not the answer, because those who produce, distribute, and consume food are all over this planet, and that is who we are focused on, and uplifting their voices. The one thing about these pillars that always stood out to me the most, and to me is like the crux of my work too, is autonomy. Autonomy doesn't mean to me that you're not using global systems at all, but it means you have the ability and you're working towards autonomy from them. That's local inputs, local outputs. One thing I think about, because I move between, you know, the United States and Trinidad often, is that I can't be hyper local. Like that used to be a goal of mine when I was in Maryland living on the Eastern Shore. But now it's evolved to be more shorter and direct and more intentional distribution chains. Because if I was hyper local, I would, you know, I wouldn't be able to share the love of chocolate with people outside of Trinidad, which is one of my goals. So yeah, but that autonomy is important. So in our business model doesn't even include export, because we feel like we have to saturate the market here and work with farmers here and work with consumers here before we try to go anywhere else. I wanted to offer these two pieces of work that I've worked on collectively in the past. Hopefully they can be shared in a follow-up email. That deal with agroecology and food sovereignty. And one of them is the blueprint for community ownership, empowerment, and prosperity in the Chesapeake Food Shed. So we also use this declaration as a guiding post for our demands of food system funders in that document. And then another example of taking the root of agroecology and food sovereignty, which is our right to define food systems for ourselves. When I was at Black Dirt Farm Collective, we collectively came up with this definition from Agroecology, which still resonates today, and I hope it's still a living definition and might be changing over time. But I like to offer it and read it out loud. Agroecology is a form of art, movement, practice, and process of social and ecological transformation that involves the reevaluation of our sacred relationships with land, water, air, seeds, and food, re-recognizes humans as co-creators that are an aspect of the planet's life support systems, values the Afro-Indigenous experience of reality and ways of knowing, cherishes ancestral and communal forms of knowledge, experience, and life ways that began in Africa and continue through the diaspora, and is rooted in the agrarian traditions, legacies, and struggles in Black experience in the Americas. So it's a mouthful, but it's just really important for me to, you know, put it out there that agroecology and Afroecology are a way of life, and it's an art, and it's a practice. It's all of those things, and I want us all to be able to embody these terms and these definitions and these movements so that we can find our own definitions and come to our own shared understandings of these things. We can ask question number 2 actually now too. So before I get too far ahead. Which one of these is a pillar of agroecology? Corporate ways of knowing, profit before people, autonomy from global markets and short distribution chains, or government assistance? Great, 82% of everyone got it right. Autonomy from global markets and short distribution chains. Definitely not profits before people. Definitely not corporate ways of knowing. And government assistance could be part of agroecology, but only with, again, with the farmers and the producers at the center of that assistance, and at the center of asking for what that assistance looks like. To get that autonomy takes organizing, of course. It means land access, it means shared politics and strategies. And what I really liked about the Nyéléni declaration is that it laid out a lot of strategies and shared struggles. So one of the way they organized it was, what are we fighting for? What are we fighting against? And what are we doing? So I pulled out there's a lot more than I put on these slides, but I pulled out of some of the ones that resonate the most with me and my work with chocolate, and we'll go through them a little bit. So what are we fighting for? This was basically, what does food sovereignty mean for us, especially at local levels? What do we have in common? What do we defend? And what do we do to sustain it? And recognition of and respect of women's roles and rights in agriculture is at the top of the list. They intentionally had 50% men and 50% women at the gathering, and they also had a specifically feminist, womanist lens to the whole event. And the women actually had their own, caucus and had their own declaration that came out of it as well. We're fighting for to value the diversity of traditional knowledge and the right to defend territories while national corporations. And so in this picture, especially the one with me and the two women, this is just to highlight how in Trinidad, women farmers really are the crux of the cacao movement. These two women came from Guyana. They're indigenous, and they moved to Trinidad and started a cocoa farm. And yeah, the things that I've learned from them about business, about the trees, about the land, is invaluable. And I take those, firsthand accounts and stories really to heart. And I also, I'm big on sharing them as well. We're evaluating the diversity of traditional knowledge. You see me in the bottom corner talking to an 85-year-old traditional midwife who's also a farmer. She's a rice farmer. She did cacao. She also makes bush rum. I probably shouldn't say that, but none of y'all will tell anybody. And collecting those stories so that I can pass them down to other people and to my child is really important and part of agroecology. And the right to defend territories, water, and seeds. One thing that I always valued and took to heart about agroecology movements and food sovereignty is that, when we weren't afraid to say we're being militant and disciplined, defending is part of that. It's not a passive defense either. We have to get ahead of the game in a lot of different ways. So that's what we're fighting for. I also wanted to add that women who have historically held the knowledge about agriculture and food and continue to produce up to 80% of the food in the poorest countries, and today are the principal custodians of biodiversity and seeds. And we are particularly affected by neoliberal and sexist policies in the food system. So the fact that this declaration put women at forefront and center is something that I definitely value. What are we fighting against? What is preventing us from realizing food sovereignty? What are the problems? What are our internal potential tensions or conflicts of interest, and how do we overcome them? So again, this is a long list that was in the declaration, but I just pulled out a few that we're fighting against: imperialism, neoliberalism, neocolonialism, and patriarchy. Still, after all these years, I probably still need to go back to school to learn deeply what those mean, but you get a sense. The domination of our food and food producing systems by corporations is one of the hugest ones. I'm especially fighting as a chocolate maker. I'm someone who's working with cacao farmers, because we know the corporations that use slave labor to flood the market with very cheap chocolate are directly opposed to the work we're doing and directly and actively attacking the work that most small artists and cacao farmers and small chocolatiers are doing. Privatization and commodification of food, knowledge, and land, and dumping of food at prices below the cost of production. Corporations basically means profits over people. And in the chocolate industry, this means fighting for local processing of cacao into chocolate for export instead of exporting all the raw beans to European countries and American country or United States of America, where then they're re-imported as cheap chocolate. Like, that's not food sovereignty. We have to be able to manufacture and have all of that in control within a community, and at least if not within a community, within a nation. So that's one of the things we're really fighting for. And it's been through mechanisms such as the World Trade Organization, bilateral and regional free trade agreements, transnational corporations that are controlling and benefiting from global markets. And, you know, it doesn't trickle down, does not trickle down. And then the hope, this is the hope and this is the beauty, is what we're actually doing about it. We can't stop at what we're for, we can't stop at what we're against, we have to just keep doing, because the struggle, la lucha continua, like the struggle continues. What is our common struggle? How do we strengthen our movements? How can we increase our resistance? How can we work better together? And organizing, and organizing of farmers in particular, and providing education for them on scaling out their businesses. We always say that the more that farmers are invested in the insight of their produce, like you know, whether that's your neighbor growing food for your other neighbor, or whether that's a farmer growing cacao beans for their own chocolate bars, you're gonna be more invested in the quality of the product, and you're gonna be more invested in the land that you're growing the produce on, because you know who it's going to. I think a big problem in our food system is, you know, farmers are so disconnected from the end goal, or where their produce ends up, and the consumer is so far removed from the farmer. So that disconnection really affects with the quality of the food and, you know, how we work together. This picture on the left is the Rio Claro, which is an area in Trinidad and in South Trinidad, where a lot of the cocoa beans that we use in our products come from. And these farmers they organize themselves and are called the Rio Claro Fine Fermenters Association. And we'll talk about why they're called fermenters when I talk about how chocolate is made. But my husband was integral in forming this cooperative, because even though we don't grow cacao on our land at a scale to use for our business, these are our friends, this is where we get our business from. So it's really important that, you know, we're all working together. So he would go to their meetings, help them set up, but not only business-wise, he would teach them how to make chocolate. He would teach them about how to package the chocolate and all the different products you can make from the beans, because it's not just chocolate, we'll go into that too. It's cocoa butter, cocoa powder, cocoa nibs. And the main goal is that once farmers are organizing themselves to not only, you know, share resources and plant things together and sell together, they're also organizing their education to, you know, create value-added products. And right now, I think they're in the process of trying to find a building where they could, you know, have a shared storefront. So all of that is, you know, adding to the autonomy of the industry and building it out. This other picture, what are we going to do about it? We're promoting ecological production as a direct strategy. We have this picture of indigenous technology, using beer crates. What we have, you know, got to use what you have to get what you need to plant cacao seedlings. And we use cocoa, we use ash, we use cocoa shells that were a waste part of our chocolate making process. We went down to the river and got river silt. So that, you know, like that's agroecology, that's food sovereignty, using what you have locally and being autonomous of these global systems if not needed. Yeah, realizing. Yep. So now let's get to the fun part, the connection to chocolate and why farmers make the best chocolatiers. Probably don't hear that often. I think a lot of people are familiar with the artisanal chocolate scene by now, and you know, might have tasted a bean to bar type of situation or a single origin. But what you can almost guarantee is that those beans were grown, fermented, dried in one country, and then probably made somewhere else. It's not very often you'll see in the grocery store, especially at, you know, in the United States, a bar that was made, yeah, in a country of origin. So I really want to highlight why that's important in the next few slides. Just to explain some of the pictures, that's one of my nephews. We went on a hike and he would pick some cacao pods that we love to just eat it fresh. So you don't always have to make chocolate. There's some many juicy, beautiful parts of the cocoa tree and process. Here's a picture of the beans roasted, looking nice and shiny, ready to make chocolate. There's a picture of one of our bars. And then lastly, there's a picture of the future of chocolate and cacao farming. And that's our baby on a cocoa house. So from the tree, like, you know, you've heard bean to bar, but we also say from tree to bar. I'll go a little bit backwards in the history of cacao. Many might have heard of it as an Aztec thing, but that was only because the Spaniards had first contact with the Aztec and they saw them drinking bitter chocolate water. So that's what they, you know, associated with them. But more genetic research of trees, as well as cultural research and, you know, anthropology, has found that cacao actually originated deeper in the Amazon basin and not near the Yucatan Peninsula. And it was always, and it goes as far back as the Mayans and before then the Olmecs. And it may, you know, there's evidence that it might have been around and being used and traded even before the Olmecs. So little tidbit and really cool fact is, like, you know, these things are always evolving. We're always learning new things and digging up new artifacts. Cacao likes cool rainforests and slight elevation. So where I live in the northern range of mountains in Trinidad is a perfect, ideal climate. It likes to grow where coffee grows as well. Fun fact, the land that I live on used to be part of the first Cadbury plantation. This was post-emancipation, so they had a lot of indentured servants on the land, but it's like we're literally reclaiming the land using agroecology from the plantation model of agriculture. So yeah, the fun fact. It likes being interplanted with shade trees and other friends. This is one of my favorite parts about it. You might see a few monocrop cocoa farms in Trinidad, but for the most part, everyone's planting traditionally, and they plant it with citrus, with banana, with breadfruit, with plantain, I've even seen it interplanted with rice, and all of these things kind of just add to the flavor and the complexity. It helps the soil. There's a tree called the immortelle tree, which is flowering right now because it flowers during cacao season. And it has leguminous roots, and it's always been traditionally planted in cocoa fields because it has a huge canopy, provides shade for the trees so that they have a nice start to life, and it also adds nitrogen to the soil. So already most people are agroecological in Trinidad, and people always want to ask if they're organic, but here it just hasn't been a priority for most farmers. It's expensive. It's, you know, people would rather just say what they're doing, and I can vouch for most of them. They're definitely doing agroecological sustainable practices, and it's mainly because, you know, money. Like you don't really have the money to spend on a bunch of chemicals necessarily. And cacao kind of, since it's a tree crop, it doesn't really need too much. once it has a good start to life. So that's in the tree. That's one of our favorite farmers, Mr. Leroy. His daughter now is taking over the business, which is beautiful to see that transition. And she, we actually were able to buy them or help them purchase a machine to make chocolate. Michael did tutorials with them to teach them. We started out making him chocolate for him to sell, and now his daughter is making their own chocolate and they don't need us anymore. And that's the point of our work. And then to the right, you can see a picture of a cacao pod that's open, and those seeds you can just suck on and they're sweet. Kind of reminds me of soursop. Fun fact, my daughter hates chocolate. She won't eat it. So I don't know what we're going to do with the business when she gets older, but she eats these raw beans like there's no end. I wonder how many of y'all knew that cacao is a fermented food as well. So after, you take it off the tree, you crack the pod open, and you leave the beans out to ferment. You put them in a heap or you put them in a box. Traditionally, they line the box with banana leaves. And this is where the farmer's ingenuity and innovation first, it becomes important to the final taste of chocolate or the final taste of whatever is made with the beans. Because based on where you're living, based on what you put in that box, while you're fermenting, different bacteria, different mold, different yeast are going to colonize that heap, and it's going to give you different flavors. Also, how well you keep the temperature up, how well you insulate, all of that, and how long you ferment for, all influence the final flavor. So one cool thing about being at the country of origin while making chocolate is that, we get some beans from a farmer and we're like, how long did you ferment these for? And then they tell us, and then we're like, well, next time, could you try to ferment a little longer so, it could taste this way versus that way? One of our favorite things is like eating the beans right there with the farmer. And a lot of them don't even eat their own beans because like, why would you do that? They don't taste amazing, but we're showing like, we're tasting the beans right now so that we can figure out what they'll taste like later on. So that's how fermentation happens. And you see with the banana leaves, it's still such a traditional process. Almost any chocolate that you buy, even if it's Hershey's, even if the beans came from West Africa, there's going to be this very personal step of a farmer fermenting the beans. Like there's no industrial way that I know of to get around it. After fermentation, the beans go to the cocoa house. The iconic cocoa house is, what you see in the top right-hand corner, triangular. Well, it's a platform with a triangular roof that slides back and forth. And that's important because beans need to dry. So if it's raining, farmers have to always be looking out for the rain so that they can move the cocoa roof forward and cover the beans. To mitigate this, which is a newer thing because honestly, weather has become so unpredictable, a lot of farmers are doing what you see in the left hand at the bottom of the left, which is building something like a greenhouse structure. So this means like you're never going to get rained on, but there's not as much airflow. So you'll see that there's fans and some forced heat that farmers use to keep, the airflow going. And I'm not gonna lie, like there's nothing, there's just something special about sun-dried beans. That energy from the sun definitely helps, but we have to be adaptable and resilient. So I'm also happy that farmers are finding ways to combat, the issue with not the rain being unpredictable and not just having like a distinct rainy season and a distinct dry season and knowing when you should put the cocoa out. So it has to be dried for a few days in the sun. And so much energy goes into this, like every day throughout the day, the farmer is going and turning the beans, moving them around, making sure that they're not getting moldy. You can see a picture of a baby's foot on some beans because traditionally in Trinidad, they did something called dancing the cocoa. And that's not really a necessary step, even though a lot of people think it is because it's like a cool thing. But you dance on them to polish them and take off any of the fermentation. Kind of leaves some stuff on the shell sometimes, so you just kind of dance on them, beat your feet on them to polish them and remove any residue. So let me ask question 3, which is the last question, to see if everyone's still listening, paying attention. Where did cacao trees originate? West Africa, the Yucatan Peninsula, the Amazon rainforest, or the Andes Mountains? Nice. This was a little harder for most people. I see there's 56% said Amazon rainforest. You said the Yucatan Peninsula because, as I mentioned, that is where most people think it originated. And then I see a few people put West Africa, which I would assume is because that's where the majority of cacao beans come from today, but that's a product of colonization, because the Spaniards were the first to take the beans from South America over to Africa. Nice. So we're coming towards the end. So after you got the bean, you got the tree, then you got the fermentation, then you have to dry it. And this is when we come in, and we come pick up the beans, the dry beans. You can see someone with a meter. We want them to be around 7% water content or lower, or right around 7%. You see a picture of a finished chocolate bar, and you see a picture of some cocoa nibs, which is basically dried beans that are roasted and ground to a desired consistency, depending on what you're using them for. So you can use these nibs and eat them just like this. One of my favorite things to do. You can put these nibs right into the chocolate machine, which is a grinder with stone wheels, and that will continuously, using friction and heat, grind those beans down into a liquid, which is called a chocolate liqueur. And it's liquid because cocoa beans have about 50% fat in them, 45 to 50% fat. So that liquefies it. Roasting is another chance besides fermentation to create certain flavor profiles in your chocolate. So when you have a farmer, so I'll give you an example of one of the farmers we work with is named Jiwan, and he and his wife wanted their own chocolate bar to sell to their friends, their family, and to get a little extra income, because one of the people that they were trying to export to, anyway, they wanted some extra income. So even though we use Jiwan's beans in our chocolate won't taste the same as Jiwan's chocolate. And that's kind of crazy to me, but it's just based on how we roast. So Jiwan, we like our chocolate to have like fruity notes and floral notes and kind of a light roast. Jiwan likes that dark roast, that deep cocoa flavor. So same beans, different roasts, and he has a completely different product. And we write down that formula that we roasted it by, and like that is that farmer's product, that is their intellectual property, because we help work on it with them, and we won't roast our beans that way. Another thing that you can do value added from chocolate is, of course, make cocoa butter and cocoa powder. That's usually made in a large hydraulic press, or you can make it small scale. On the island of Trinidad, there's only one large scale hydraulic press to make cocoa butter and powder. So most people who are making it go there. And that's at the scale, like you have to go to him with 300 kilos at a time. And it would be great, again, to build an industry to really scale out. You really need more processing opportunities in the country. Also value added is taking innovative solutions to waste, for example. So when we winnow the beans, you crack the shell off and get the nibs, there's a lot of shells left over. Some of that we use for fertilizer, but we also have a product called Mayan style brewing cacao, which is mainly shells and some of the nibs, and you brew it like coffee, and it's a pick me up. It feels like coffee without the crash. And my husband has won awards for that product because it's an innovative use of the normal waste. And even though chocolate is the most desired and profitable end product, each step leading up to it is directly influenced by traditional knowledge and ingenuity of the farmers. And I just wanted to drive that home. Like, I think chocolate makers get a lot of credit for making good chocolate. Of course, we love chocolate. We love that it tastes good. So we thank our chocolate makers. But really, it's that feedback loop with the farmer that really makes a good chocolate. And when you have farmers, working for next to nothing, or even, beans that are being exported through slave labor, which is a real thing in the chocolate industry, obviously you're not going to get that taste, that flavor, that intention, that energy that you're going to get from these small scale farmers who are growing it and getting a good price because they're doing direct trade. So it's really important to look for that when you're getting chocolate. So building an industry from the ground up is what we're really trying to do. Cacao used to be king in Trinidad. They always say cocoa was king. When cocoa was king, like that was the day. And at one point, a majority of the agricultural land in Trinidad was planted in cocoa. But because of oil being found here and being exported, that changed the direction of the economy. But recently, within the last couple of years, the oil industry is dying down here. So we see it as an important time to return to cacao as a local economy driver. An industry, as a word, is defined as processing of raw materials and the manufacture of goods. But in order to have the need for large-scale shared processing, which is more economical, we need more chocolatiers and cacao farmers with a shared vision in politics. So that's the work we're doing. You can see our friend G1, who I told you about, his bar is called the Flavor Note. And he's been selling out. He's one of our biggest customers. I mentioned Mr. Leroy. He's from Danessa Gardens. That's his daughter's name. And you can see that they even shout us out on their packaging. It says produced by Panorama Cacao. So that allows this shared marketing as well. So you win if more people are buying chocolate from you, then we're also getting more business. So it's just a win-win for everybody. I have this picture of cacao plants because in Trinidad we have it's a very unique place to build an industry because we have the largest gene bank of cocoa trees in the world. It's the Cocoa Gene Bank is housed here. So we're able to work with universities and extension and agricultural departments in Trinidad to really work on breeding, to get the best varieties, to get the best flavor, the best yields. And the saplings are relatively really cheap. Each one of these really is like $1.50 US. And buying in bulk with other farmers, we're able to plant up large swaths of land by helping each other. Some people used to say that we're saturating the industry by teaching so many people how to make chocolate, but we feel, let me go to the next slide. We're about scaling out instead of scaling up. Scaling up feels very individual and personal. Scaling out feels like we're working with everybody, and it means creating more players in the field instead of being the dominating player. So, like I said, some people say our work is saturating the market, but we know that in true agroecological and food sovereignty fashion, there's room for everybody and all ways of knowing and all ways of being. We all have our own flavors. With more of us, we'll be able to buy shared equipment. Like I'll show this picture in the middle is a rice mill. My uncle is actually a rice farmer in South Trinidad. And it's so inspiring how, everyone's kind of just doing their organizing in their own small ways, but he bought this from China, a really cheap mill. And he's been able to help his friends who are also rice farmers to mill their rice and get it to market, because it's just a huge barrier in Trinidad to have infrastructure like processing equipment. It has to do with importation prices. It has to do with being historically locked out of the the industry. It's a lot of factors, but it's beautiful to see us reclaiming the manufacturing and processing so that we can truly build industries. You can see scaling out also means creating new businesses with what you're doing. So one of our friends, he's a fermenter. He makes chocolate. Well, we actually make his chocolate. What else does he do? He exports beans to other countries, but one of his favorite things is to make cocoa wine, and we sell. We make chocolate for him from his beans, and then he sells us cocoa wine that we also sell. So it's just like this very intimate circular economy. And I can't stress the importance enough of farmers having enough education and resources to have at least 1 or 2 value-added businesses so that they can scale out. I also have this picture of a beautiful sunset and goats because agritourism and ecotourism is a huge part of scaling out for farmers. Like, you can't always make the money that you need from one crop or one activity. So you see a lot more people opening up their farms to agritourism and ecotourism. Last slide. How to support. I hope everyone's wondering how they can support after hearing about this work. You can buy chocolate from artisans who directly trade with cacao farmers. I know that's easier said than done, but you know, if you're a person who eats a lot of chocolate, like, that really should be one of your priorities. You should invest in businesses that support small farmers, as well as invest in businesses that support small farmers, as well as directly investing in small farmers. People need infrastructure. That's like so huge. They need land, they need infrastructure. Ask your favorite stores to carry better brands and help the small artisans get their product out there. Everyone knows about fair trade, but if you can actually find people who are direct trading with farmers, that is like then you know that the farmers are being empowered and getting the price that they need for their work. And yeah, invite farmers to speak, to exchange, ask what they need, pay them for their time. We actually have a GoFundMe up right now if you search for Panorama Cacao, because we're doing a capital campaign to buy the equipment needed to scale out. So we want to be able to make more chocolate from more farmers and get more beans from more farmers, and we need larger equipment to do that. So that's another way to support. And please just ask me any questions. I'm always a resource. Like, I'm a connector. I call myself an independent extension agent. So I love talking about this stuff. I love talking about all types of farming, all types of industries. So feel free to contact me if you have any questions. You can find us on IG, Instagram at Panorama Cacao or Natural Aleya, and you can email at panoramacacao@gmail.com. I thank y'all for listening, and I welcome any questions from anybody.
That was awesome, Aleya. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. I learned so much.
Thank you.
We have a really long list of questions. I know you see them in the Q&A box.
Okay.
Are you ready?
Yeah, I'm ready.
Okay. All right. Let's jump in. The first one is, do you see any correlation between the work that you do directly with farmers and interest, willingness for subsequent generations to continue the farms of their parents, grandparents?
Yes. I find that our work can be like social work for families because we're young, we look fun. So when we show up at the farm, really interested in a grandparent or a parent and what they're doing, we've seen multiple times kids get more interested in the business after that. And we've had parents be like, can you talk to my son? Can you talk to my daughter? Like, you know, they could be doing what you're doing, but for the family. So I definitely see a direct correlation. Would love to see it at a larger scale, because just like everywhere, Trinidad definitely has that age gap with farmers, and you know, they're dying out and there isn't as many people to come take the charge. But I will say more people are recognizing that it's a charge to take.
Thanks, Aleya. And I just want to say it was so beautiful. Your presentation was beautiful. And I especially liked how, you know, the first half of your presentation, you were starting off more of like with the platform and the values of food sovereignty and talking to us about what we're for and what we're for against. And then the second part of the presentation, you're actually showing us like what food sovereignty looks like for you in your community, in your family. And I think that's a beautiful combination, because I think sometimes it can be hard for students who are learning about food sovereignty because we only focus on the first part of like the bigger picture ideas, and people want to know like, well, what does it really look like? Like, what is food sovereignty? And so I love how your presentation tied those two things together.
Thank you.
Yeah. So I see, thank you everybody. I see so many awesome questions in the chat box. Let's just start off with a quick one. Someone's asking how long, or I know it's a spectrum, but how long does the cacao ferment for? What's that process?
It's usually around 4 to 6 days. It'll stay in the box, and the people are turning it daily. They check the temperature constantly. Yeah, 4 to 6 days.
And so the flavor really changes even in those 3 days.
Yeah, it starts out as this bright, bitter flavor. Then over time, you start, the chocolate notes start coming out. Yeah, what you taste out the pod almost is unrecognizable to chocolate that you taste at the end.
Nice. And so to build on that question, how long does the whole process take?
So 4 to 6 days for fermenting, 3 days for harvesting or for drying. So 7 to 8 days from 7 to 8 days from when you harvest to when they're fully dry. And then when we pick up the beans, in order to make chocolate, you have to put it in the machine for 2 to 3 days. And that's how long it's grinding down to the right consistency. Everyone has their own formula for that too. Some people just do a day. We like to do 2 to 3 days, but that actually depends on your humidity levels and a lot of other things, moisture content. So it's like you always have to taste and smell chocolate as it changes.
Thanks. Here's another question, Annika, who's asking if you can just talk a little bit more about the chocolate industry and the enslaved labor that is present in the global chocolate. Can you explain a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not super well versed, besides knowing that in West Africa, there's a lot of child labor, a lot of slave labor being used on the cacao plantations. A lot of land is being cleared and being monocropped because like that's the industry there. Like that's the way that people see to make money, and that's the way they're being forced to make money in a lot of ways. So it is pretty tragic, and they say that they're trying to work on it. This is a little aside, but I don't know if anyone ever recently saw that there was a report that said dark chocolate isn't good for you because there's cadmium in it. And that really struck me, because that when I said they're actively attacking small scale farmers in South America, because cadmium is in newer soils. So in Africa, you don't find cadmium in the soil. You mainly find it in South American and Caribbean countries, but it's there naturally. It's been there since the Aztecs and the Mayans and the Olmecs were eating chocolate. I'm not a heavy metal detox expert, but from what I've read and the research I've done on the levels, it just seems like an industry ploy to make people scared to buy South American and Caribbean chocolate, which is dark, which is good for you, which is healthy. And the report literally says you'd be safer, getting milk chocolate from Africa. And there are plenty of African chocolatiers who are doing the same thing we're doing, and taking beans from within their country, from small scale, more sustainable farms, and making chocolate too. So you can do that research and find those people. Yeah.
Yeah, it was really helpful. Thank you. I was wondering that too. Thank you to the person who posed that question. So the next one is, was your land soil stripped of resources or harmed in any way after being a Cadbury plantation?
Yeah, I'm sure. That was, I mean, it was in the 1800s. So we don't, the only remnants of it we see are like old cocoa trees around, like those like 100-year-old trees randomly you'll pop up in the forest that when we're walking and going on hikes. But by now, a lot of that has been reclaimed by, you know, the natural flora and fauna. But at one point, it was definitely stripped of resources. And where we are, it's a rainforest. And people think like, oh, you're in Trinidad, you must be able to grow all the time, all year long. But stripping of resources is a big thing. Like even rain and the constant degradation of soil from erosion, you know, that really affects where we live in particular, because we're in a mountainous, rainy area.
Thanks, Aleya. Here's another question. Someone's asking if you can talk a little bit about, I think they heard your background, which included permaculture training, and they're wondering how that training has impacted how you run your business now, and like what you gleaned from that, what you're doing now.
Yeah, it's funny because like, yeah, I've been a disruptor in agroecology and permaculture spaces, because I'm like, yeah, Shakira knows what are y'all really talking about. So I've taken those permaculture classes and like redefined it for myself. And yeah, it's for me, it was more, especially the permaculture class in Trinidad, it was less about permaculture and more about learning the flora and fauna of Trinidad and how tropical ecosystems work. But yeah, it is an important way of knowing, but it's just one way of knowing. And yeah, I can't, one way it does affect me is I think of zones around the house, for example, where I'm going to plant something. Like, does it make sense to plant it somewhere where I'm never going to look? No, I need to plant it where I go every day. So yeah, I do think of it in systems.
Nice. Okay, so we have two big questions. To what degree have economic agricultural policies in Trinidad recognized the importance of agroecology in rural development and climate change? And what makes Trinidad local tea distinct?
And why is it called tea? I really wanted to do this call too. Well, when I was at Black Dirt, I was really involved with La Via Campesina and agroecology movements. But since I've been in Trinidad, I haven't been as involved. But from what I remember, yeah, even though the global South is very represented, South America is very represented, I don't think Trinidad has been historically that represented, or Caribbean countries in general. So really trying to hone in like why it's so important here. What economic agricultural policies? I think, yeah, like I mentioned, oil used to be such a big thing in Trinidad up until a couple of years ago that most agriculture policies did not, you know, support small scale farmers at all. But now we're starting to see a little bit more support for that. And then with cocoa tea, what makes Trinidad cocoa tea a specific thing is like they roast the beans, and then they don't grind them all the way to make chocolate. They might just grind it in a mortar and pestle until it's a paste, and then they add a specific mix of local spices, which are usually bay leaf, cinnamon, nutmeg, tonka bean, and sometimes clove, and then they grate it into a cup and, you know, and boil it. So that's what they call everything in Trinidad is called a tea if it's hot. If it's hot milk, it's called tea. So yeah.
What about the expression "spill the tea"? Do you say that there?
No.
As in like spill the gossip. Okay, here's a question for you. And I know, especially when you're talking about the different flavor notes and the fruity parts of the chocolate you make and everything, I'm wondering, I know you're like intentional and explicit about your market, keeping your market in Trinidad for your chocolate. And I'm just asking the question that I have a feeling is on many people's minds, which is there a way for folks, for example, in Michigan to taste your chocolate? Or we're not?
Yeah, we would love to work on some, like I said, like local is good, but also direct direct trade is good too. So we are always looking for people who want to stock our chocolate. For now, whenever I come up to the States, this is around every 3 months. I usually just bring a bunch up and ship it to friends. Shakira got some a couple months ago, and yeah, definitely looking for some direct supply chains to make it make sense. But for now, shipping is just so prohibitive. It's just one of those things. Like, it's crazy how much it costs to ship even a pound of anything from Trinidad. And which is why we need to work together as an industry so that we can share those type of costs with each other.
Shakira, I'll pass it to you. I think we have time for a couple more questions.
Yep. Oh, Maria. Okay. How much chocolate can be made with however many pounds of beans?
That's a really good question. So, because then I can talk about percentages a little bit. So, if you have a 50% chocolate, which is 50% beans, 50% sugar, and whatever else, it could be 50% sugar, or it could be 25% sugar, 25% milk. But that percentage tells you how much cocoa beans is in it. So if I have 2 pounds of cocoa beans and I'm making a 50% chocolate, then I would need, well, broadly, I would need 4 pounds, but then you do lose some in winnowing. You generally lose 75% of the weight and when you winnow the beans and take the shell off. So you just have to account for that.
Cool. Thanks, Aleya. And we have Annie's asking a question about how do we as consumers, how can we determine if the bars were produced in the beans country of origin?
Yeah, I mean, most people will be very proud to put that on the packaging. If something was produced anywhere north of, Florida, then you can be pretty sure it wasn't produced in the country of origin. But I would say, yeah, you would find it on the packaging. And I like I said in the talk too, like, that's not going to be very common because at the country of origin, we're having issues to ship our things out. So you will more likely find bars made with beans from Trinidad by a small scale artisan. And you can ask them about their trade and how they get their beans. And that's a good way to support the farmers too.
Nice. Yeah, thank you. That was really helpful for my personal understanding. So last question, so we can end here. Do you tend to not like chocolate candy sold at stores because it's filled? I think Moyo's answering for you. It's filled with more sugar than the true chocolate you make.
Yeah, I tend to not like it. I just try not to turn my nose at it. We say we're kind of purists because it's not really the sugar that I have a problem with, because I mean our chocolate could have 50% sugar, but we are getting brown cane sugar from Guyana, so I know what kind of sugar it is. But it's more so, yeah, the other ingredients that I worry about. We don't really make milk chocolate too often. We're very big on just like beans and sugar, like no lecithin, no emulsifiers, no vanilla. And that limits us. And some people don't know, people want flavors. They want nuts included. They want mint. But, we really want people to appreciate the taste of the actual cacao by not adulterating it too much. So, I don't eat too much other chocolate. But when people give it to me, they're always like, oops, like, you're probably not going to eat this. But I'm like, I'll still eat it, Won't let it waste. I like chocolate.
Great. Well, Aleya, thank you so much, and thank you everybody for your thoughtful questions. We just have a minute or two left. We are gonna do a word cloud. So there's a link in the chat. You can click the link, or you can scan your phone if you want to use that code, and just drop like a word or two that really stuck with you, or a concept that really stuck with you from today's class, something that was a memorable theme or topic. And then So I see someone just put it in the chat, but you can actually put it if you click on that link where it says word cloud link in the chat, click that, and then you can put your word there. And we look forward to seeing what stuck with everybody. Okay, I'm not surprised to see chocolate. Agroecology, fermentation. It's moving quick. Cacao nibs, representation. Trinidad. Collaboration. Agroecology. Autonomy. Connections, family. This is beautiful.
Nice. I love seeing the words that resonated.
Yeah. Tea. Ancestry. Awesome. Scaling out. Awesome. Well, Aleya, thank you so much again for joining us, and to the rest of the class and community members. Of course, everybody is invited next week on campus. It's in the Dana building. And we're going to start right at 6:30 with their African drumming and dance performance from a Detroit-based group. Then we're going to have all of these 5-minute fast talks, and then we're going to have a delicious reception at the end. There's a Detroit-based caterer, Cooking with Q, is going to make some really good food for us. So hope to see you there, and good night, everybody.